Rex had been off for 3 days. Not sick, not tired, but every dawn he would plant himself by the corral fence, staring hard at the open desert like he was waiting on something Julius Blackwell couldn't see. The dog refused food, ignored the cattle, and turned away from every game. He just stood there tense and silent, as if listening for a call no one else could hear. Then came this morning. Julius pushed open the cabin door and Rex bolted. Not toward the creek or hunting ground, but straight into the wasteland where nothing grew. Julius had never seen his dog run like that, with a kind of desperate drive that made his chest tighten. By the time Julius saddled his horse and set out, Rex was already no more than a speck in the distance. The tracks led toward the old steam locomotive. Everybody in the territory knew about that rusted giant, sitting half buried in sand far from any rail line. Nobody spoke of it for long. Old-timers shut their mouths quick, like there was something about that iron beast a man was better off forgetting. Rex had never once looked that way in all their rides. Yet now Julius crested the ridge and found his dog circling the massive engine, nose low, tail stiff. The afternoon sun caught the brass fittings, flashing signals across the desert. That's when Julius froze, fresh boot prints. Crisp edges not yet worn soft by wind. Someone had been here, walking slow around the engine, stopping often like searching. Julius dismounted, boots sinking into the sand with thuds that felt too loud in the silence. The locomotive loomed before him, black iron scarred by sun, standing like a monument to something long forgotten. Rex sat beside the driving wheels, ears sharp, eyes fixed on Julius with an urgency that felt almost human. Julius knelt by the prints. The sand still firm. Whoever made them had been here within a day, maybe less. His jaw tightened. This was his land, what little the bank hadn't taken. He had 3 weeks to raise money he didn't have. Strangers had no business here, least of all near a train folks wouldn't dare discuss. Anger burned through the worry. He'd already lost cattle to thieves, water rights to lawyers, and his wife to a grave marked by a stone he couldn't afford. The last thing he needed was someone prowling his ground like they owned it. Rex suddenly rose and slipped behind the tender car. Julius called his name, but the sound bounced strange against the iron, hollow and twisted. No answer, only silence, until Julius noticed it. A panel on the locomotive hung open, not rusted through, not broken, but ajar, as if built to hide something. Steam engines didn't have secret compartments, not ones Julius had ever heard of. Yet the boot prints led straight to the gap. He crouched low. The metal shocked cold against his hand despite the desert heat. A smell drifted out, not rust, not dust. Something sharp, something like the bank vault in town. Julius leaned closer, heart pounding, when Rex's bark ripped through the silence from behind the locomotive. It wasn't Rex's usual bark. It was sharp, frantic, a warning. Julius spun and saw the dust rising on the horizon. Riders, at least 3, maybe more, bearing down fast. He grabbed the rifle from his saddle holster and dropped low behind the locomotive's boiler. The iron beast became his cover as the horses closed in. Whoever they weren't out for leisure. They rode hard, pushing their mounts with the urgency of men on a mission. Rex slipped out from behind the tender, no longer barking, but taut and ready. He placed himself square between Julius and the oncoming riders, hackles raised like the day wolves had tested the herd years back. The dust cloud thickened. 3 riders, no doubt now, maybe 4, and they weren't wandering by mistake. Their line was straight, aimed right at the old engine like they knew it as well as he did. A sour taste filled Julius's mouth. The footprints he'd found weren't from drifters. They belonged to scouts. These men knew about the locomotive, about its hidden panel, maybe even about what waited inside. And if that was true, then they'd been watching him longer than he realized. He pressed his back against the hot iron, fighting to steady his breath. The bank had given him 3 weeks to cover his note. Now it felt less like chance and more like design. Maybe someone wanted him broken, stripped of land, so they could claim the locomotive's secret without him in the way. The hoofbeats drew closer. He could hear their voices now, low and steady, though the words didn't carry. Rex shifted, ears pricked, body tight with a growl just under the surface. Julius leaned out just enough to see. The lead rider wore a black hat and sat tall, riding with the easy command of a man used to taking what he pleased. 2 others flanked him, hands close to their sidearms, calm in a way that spoke of practice. The lead man reined in about 50 yards out. He studied the ground in silence, eyes scanning like he was reading sign. Then he turned, said something to one of the others. The reply came with laughter, not the kind that warmed a room, but the kind that froze it. Julius's gut sank. They already knew he was here. The lead rider raised his voice. "Julius Blackwell, no need to hide. We've been waiting on you to find this." Julius's throat went dry. They knew his name. This wasn't chance. He stepped out from behind the boiler, rifle steady. "Don't see reason to hide. This is my land and you're trespassing." The man in black laughed, nudged his horse forward and stopped just outside rifle range. He was older than Julius expected, grey threading his beard, face cut by years of sun and hard living. "Your land," he said slowly. "Funny, you're about 3 weeks from losing it to the bank." The words hit Julius like a hammer. How could a stranger know? Those dealings were private. Or so he thought. The rider tipped his hat. "Name's Nolan Graves. Maybe you've heard of me. I arrange acquisitions for certain parties, and they've taken a liking to this patch of desert." Julius knew the name. He'd heard it whispered in saloons and trading posts. Nolan Graves wasn't a common outlaw. He was the kind of man who showed up when someone wanted a problem handled quiet. He worked for men back east, wealthy investors who bought up failing ranches and mines for next to nothing. "I don't care who you ride for," Julius said. "You're still trespassing." Graves didn't flinch. "That locomotive behind you, fine machine, isn't it? Funny thing, though, railroad records show it was stolen 15 years back. Vanished in the night. Engine and cargo both." Julius felt his gut tighten. That explained the silence of old-timers, the reason nobody dared talk about it. But it also meant anything hidden inside belonged to someone else, someone dangerous. "My employers have been patient," Graves went on. "They've been waiting for the right moment, waiting for the landowner to get desperate enough to listen." Rex edged closer, muscles taut, eyes locked on the riders. Julius felt the trap closing. These men knew his debts, knew his weakness, and had picked their timing with care. "What do you want?" Julius asked. Graves smiled without warmth. "Simple. Walk away. Ride back to your cabin. Pretend you never saw that panel. In return, my employers might ease your troubles with the bank. And if I don't, then we'll be talking again after foreclosure," Graves said easily. "Except next time you won't own this ground." Julius measured the men. Graves sat easy in the saddle, confident, while the two at his sides shifted just enough to cut off escape. These weren't drifters. They moved like soldiers, and their horses looked trained for it. "You seem to know plenty about me," Julius said. "How do I know you can make good on what you promise?" "Because we already have," Graves answered. "Who do you think convinced the bank to give you till the end of the month?" "That wasn't luck. That was us making sure this meeting happened right." The truth hit Julius hard. He'd thought fortune had turned. Instead, he'd been led straight into their hands. "The cargo on that train," Graves continued, "was bound for the San Francisco Mint when it disappeared. A very particular cargo. My employers have been tracking it ever since. They don't care about revenge, only recovery." Julius's pulse jumped. A mint meant gold, maybe silver, enough to wipe out his debt forever, enough to change everything. But it also meant these men wouldn't blink at killing him. "I haven't touched a thing," Julius said quietly. "Not yet," Graves agreed, "but we've been watching. Ever since the wind shifted 3 days ago, carrying the scent of old iron. Your dog caught it too, didn't he? Animals sense what men can't." Rex's ears flattened, his body lowering, more aggressive now. "Heat expansion," Graves explained, almost casual. 15 years sealed tight. Then the sun worked its way through the metal. "Your dog smelled it before you did." Julius stayed silent, mind racing. These men might already know more than he did. They might even know how to open the thing. "Here's how this plays out," Graves said, his voice turning cold. "You show us what the dog found. Help us pull it out. Then you forget it ever happened. Your debt's cleared, your land stays yours, and if I don't?" One of the riders shifted in the saddle, hand dropping near his gun. "Then you'll have yourself an accident out here in the desert," Graves said flatly. "A real shame. A man thrown from his horse this far out might not be found for days." Julius felt sweat slide down his back, though the desert was already burning hot. These men weren't bluffing. They carried themselves like professionals, the kind who had solved problems before. But one thing didn't sit right. If they knew about the hidden compartment, if they'd been planning this for months, why bring him into it? Unless opening it required something they didn't have, something only he could provide. He lowered his rifle just a little, weighing his words. "What makes you think I can open something your people haven't cracked in 15 years? Graves glanced at one of his men before answering. "Because it's not just hidden. It's locked, and it takes a key that should have been destroyed the night the engine vanished. But we have reason to believe it survived." "I don't have any key," Julius said flatly. "Not knowingly," Graves replied. "But your late wife, Martha, she kept books for the railroad before you married her. She had access to records other folks didn't." Julius's chest turned cold. Martha had been gone 2 years, and never once had anyone tied her to the missing locomotive. She'd only worked payroll supply orders, just office work. She'd never mentioned a stolen train. "She wouldn't have known what she had," Graves explained, his tone steady. "But bookkeepers kept copies of everything. Cargo lists, shipping manifests, even the codes for secure compartments. Odds are she carried some of it home, tucked in with recipes and letters." Julius's mind flashed to the wooden box Martha had used for their important papers. Land deeds, bills, letters from her family back east. He had never sorted it after she died. Couldn't bring himself to. "We searched your cabin while you were tending cattle," one of Graves's men said with a smirk. "Didn't find the key, but we found proof it exists. Your wife kept records neat as a pin." The violation hit Julius harder than the threats. They'd been in his home, touching Martha's things, digging through what little he had left of her. "Where is it?" Graves demanded. "The combination, the code, whatever she saved." "We know she took something." Julius forced his face still. "Maybe she did. I don't know where it'd be now." "Then you'd best remember," Graves warned. "My employers have money tied up in this recovery. We could have come sooner, but we needed you to find the compartment first. A man's easier to persuade when he thinks there's something in it for him." Rex suddenly stiffened, a low growl rolling in his throat. Not at the riders, but at the locomotive. Julius turned and felt his stomach clench. The panel had shifted wider. A grinding scrape echoed through the iron frame as the desert heat pressed the old engine past its limit. In the gap, light caught on something that wasn't brass or iron, something brighter. "Well now," Graves muttered, "seems the desert's lending us a hand." One of his men swung down from the saddle and started toward the engine, revolver loose in his grip. Julius lifted his rifle, but Graves lifted a calming hand. "Easy," he said smoothly. "No call for bloodshed. Long as we keep steady. Charlie's just going to take a look." Charlie, crouched by the opening, leaned forward into the darkness. A whistle slipped through his teeth. "Boss, you better see this." Graves swung down from his horse and moved to the opening, leaving one rider mounted with eyes fixed on Julius. Tactical. One to watch him. Two to handle the prize. "Sweet mercy," Graves breathed as he leaned inside. 15 years and it's all still here. Julius couldn't see what they saw, but the tone in their voices told him enough. Whatever lay in that compartment was worth every year of waiting, every trick they had played. "There's a problem," Charlie said, his voice carrying across the still air. "The main container's sealed tight. We'll need that combination your wife saved." Graves straightened, his expression hardening as he turned back. "Change of plans, Blackwell. We're riding to your cabin. You're going to find those papers. No more stalling. And if I can't, then we tear that cabin apart board by board," Graves said without hesitation. "Your wife kept records. She always did. Somewhere in that house is what we need." The weight of it pressed down on Julius. They had already violated his home once. Now they meant to do it again, and worse, with him forced to help. But one thing gave him pause. If Martha's papers truly held the combination, then he was the only man keeping them from their prize. They needed him alive. "All right," Julius said at last. "We'll go. But first I want to see it. I want to know exactly what I'm supposed to help you steal." Graves's smile was thin. "Fair enough. But once you see it, there's no turning back. He'll be tied to this same as us." They stepped aside, letting Julius approach. His boots crunched softly in the sand as he came up to the yawning gap. The sunlight reached in now, casting its glow across neat rows of metal boxes stacked with care. He recognized them. Sealed transport containers, the kind banks and government offices used for moving treasure across long miles. "Silver," Graves said softly. 47 containers. 20 pounds apiece. Bound for the San Francisco Mint. Worth more now than when it left the rails. Julius did the math in his head. Nearly 1,000 pounds of pure silver. enough to buy 10 ranches his size, enough to ruin a man forever if the wrong people knew he held it. The crew was meant to deliver it and ride back empty, Charlie added, but they vanished into the desert instead, figuring to wait until the trouble cooled. Didn't count on Apache raids. They never made it out. Julius's gut tightened. He knew the stories. Travelers gone missing, bones found years later. The crew must have sealed the cache before their end, hoping someone might find it one day. Why not just strip the locomotive years ago? Julius asked. Because it's built against thieves, Graves answered. Force it, and the contents are destroyed. Railroad made sure of that, which is why we need your wife's records. The combination exists in only 3 places. The San Francisco office, burned in '91. The engineer's notes, lost with him. And the bookkeeper's files, the ones your wife carried home. Rex edged closer to Julius, but his attention wasn't on Graves or his men. The dog stared out across the desert, hackles rising again. Julius followed his gaze and spotted another dust cloud. This one was larger. You expecting more company? Julius asked. Graves spun, hand drifting toward his sidearm. Charlie, how many? Charlie climbed onto the running board of the locomotive. 5, maybe 6. Riding hard. Graves swore under his breath. That'll be my employers. They weren't due till tomorrow. The riders closed the distance quickly. Even from afar, Julius could tell they weren't cut from the same cloth as Graves's men. Their coats were fine, their horses expensive, bred for speed and strength. Eastern money dressed for business in the middle of the desert. Graves, the lead rider, called. You were told to wait until we arrived. Circumstances changed, Mr. Whitmore, Graves answered, his tone suddenly respectful. The compartment opened on its own with the heat. We couldn't risk delay. Whitmore dismounted, thin and pale from a life indoors, but his movements carried the weight of command. His eyes locked on the silver containers exposed by the shifting metal. Have you retrieved the cargo? He asked. Not yet, Graves said. We need the combination. Blackwell's late wife kept the records. Whitmore finally turned to Julius, studying him like a rancher sizing up stock. Mr. Blackwell, I trust you understand the gravity of your position. Julius felt the press of 6 armed men around him, but he also knew he held the one thing they couldn't take. I understand you need something from me. Indeed, Whitmore said. And for your help, we'll see you compensated. 5% of the recovery. 5% of nearly 1,000 pounds of silver was more wealth than Julius had ever dreamed of. Enough to clear his debts, enough to keep the ranch. But Whitmore's voice told him plain. Any promise made here would last only as long as it suited them. There's a problem, Julius said evenly. I don't have those papers anymore. A heavy silence fell. The wind itself seemed to pause. Explain, Whitmore said softly. Martha made copies, Julius continued, his tone steady. She sent the originals east with her sister when she got sick. Family papers all bundled together. It was a lie, but he carried it like gospel. In truth, the document still sat in a wooden box back at the cabin. However, Julius added, I remember enough. She showed me the railroad coding once. If I try, I can open it. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. You're saying you can unlock it yourself? I can try, but if I succeed, I want half. In writing. The standoff that followed was short but sharp. Refusing meant admitting failure to men who had invested 15 years. At last, Whitmore gave a slow nod. 30%. Not a word more, Julius agreed. He knelt by the container, recalling the numbers Martha had used for everything dear to her, her birthday and their wedding day. His fingers moved over the mechanism, setting the code. With a click, the seal gave way. The lid lifted, revealing rows of polished silver bars glowing in the afternoon light. The gathered men exhaled as one. 6 months later, Julius Blackwell stood as the wealthiest rancher in the territory. His debts cleared, his land secure. Graves and his men drifted on to other ventures. Whitmore returned east with his silver, and life in the desert rolled forward. But in the wooden box beneath the floorboards of Julius's cabin, Martha's railroad papers remained untouched, filled with codes for shipments no one had yet recovered. Julius kept them as his own quiet insurance, a secret he never intended to share.